Gitam naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jayodir nashna prayashu bhadreshu nityam bhagada sevaya bhagati utamashoki bhaktir bhavati naistaki nigamal kaparurgaritam phalam shukamakaramita dravisamitam pibata bhagatam rasam nityam bhagada sevaya Krishna sadam bhagate dhammagini karonashta dishamasha parana kodunoditaham Tama Piada Bashuta Vishutam Vibu Samyapilena Vidam Vidukasaram Prakyahi Duhur Mahoradi Tadmanam Sanklesha Nirvana Musandi Nanyataham Atmaramastamone Nigrantika Korvandiapi Itam Bhutam Gunahari Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinubandhu Jadpate Gopesha Gopika Kantara Kantanamostute Jayatam Surato Pango Mahamadir Matirgati Matsavasha Parambo Jodhadana Madana Mohanam Seeman Rasarasaram Vivam Sivana Karsan Vinashanirbago Gopinata Sri Snaham Divyad Vrindaranyaka Padrumada Srimad Ratnagara Shima Sanishto Sri Sri Radha Shila Govinda Prestilavi He Sevamana Shmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Chadjikari Taya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Mangalang Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guru Rajatam Mangalam Panadi Kaksho Manganaya Tano Hari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasadevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Mahadevi Cha Vidmahi Vishnu Pandita Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastubhyam Sare Sare Hari Pre Namastubhyam Dadade Tapta Kanchara Gaurangir Hare Vindavaneshwari Vishavanusute Devi Pranamani Hari Pre Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnaya Bhutare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvishesa Sanivari Praskada Desana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. It's Motivational Monday. We didn't have any programs last week in the wake of the Farmington Hills Color Festival, to which I flew and emceed. About 1,500 people came. It's right there on the temple property. Probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 years since they've acquired that property, renovated it, and had the grand opening. I know that several Utahns went for the opening, Sundari Priya, Govinda, Dave as well. Nice property, a lot of wonderful devotees, headed up by Yugo Kishore Das. He's a brahmachari that used to visit Utah quite often, less so now that he's been charged with the management of that temple. They had the Festival of Colors last year for the first time. Not many people came. It was sort of considered not a success. Nothing in devotional service is ever a failure. There's always gain. But they would probably describe it not a success. But to their great credit, they decided to try it a second time and see if they couldn't turn around. And that's exactly what they did. Many more people came this time. And they had a blast. They had a wonderful time. And so I think the future of that event at that location is assured, at least in the immediate future. And I also enjoyed being able to MC. Funny incident. Usually I'll only get to do 4 or 5 of my songs. I insert them in between the acts. Instead of having dead space between one DJ and one performer, one dancer, another, I just go in and throw in my little rap songs. So they started the festival, and as is always the case with an Indian crowd, nobody came at 2:00. It was from 2 to 6 were the hours of the event. So hardly anyone was there. So they had a DJ, a Kanti Govinda from the Ypsilanti community there in Michigan. He did a half an hour. And then I went on stage to announce the yoga teacher. His name was Devamrita. And they said, oh, the yoga teacher is not scheduled to go on for another half an hour. So I said, well, what do you want? So I did my first set. I actually did my first half-hour set, just, consuming the time before the yoga teacher came on. And then by the time They did a half an hour DJ set. I did a half an hour set, and there was a half an hour. Then there was a big crowd, and then you bring out the big guns, Malini and so on and so forth. But I was able to put in 4 or 5 songs right there. And so altogether out of my 12, my repertoire of 12, I got 10 songs in. And now I've tasted that. Now I'm not going to go to these distant locations without at least presenting 10 songs. I'm not going to go anywhere anymore for 4 songs. And speaking of songs, let me share with you, because we've been on Ganesh for so long, and I felt, the creative muse after having attended a couple of color events, and the need to create some additional material. It's the nature of the soul to want to glorify the Lord in whatever way one can and with one's abilities. So I just felt moved to sit down and kind of play with some words and see if I couldn't come up with a song about Gajendra. So I'm going to share this with you, okay? I don't have any music to go with it, but I'll just share this with you. I'm sharing it with Shali, with Bhai Bobby, with Jean, with Brent, and Sundari Priya. So this is the Ganesh song, okay? Gajendra, king of elephants, was sporting a heavenly planet, courting his wives in a lotus-filled lake, cavorting in the water. He'd snorted some honey through his trunk and was quite drunk. A crocodile clamped his jaws in the elephant's leg, and though he stamped, trampled, and scrambled, he couldn't get the croc to withdraw. Through the tug of war, Gajendra was losing the fight to stay upright, dragged further from the shore, nagged by the reptile. His strength was flagging day by day. Lacking the backing of the other pachyderms, Gajendra realized he was alone in this dangerous zone. The water had turned to foam, his friends had flown, and there was no one to phone. Devoid of his fabled strength at the end of his rope's length, Gajendra's hopes turned to the Lord, who awards protection to his devotees. He gave up tugging on his leg, which the croc wanted to devour. Plucking a lotus flower with his trunk from the muck of the lake, Gajendra sought the Lord's power. Krishna, you are the root of the cosmos, the fruit of the Vedas, the absolute truth who plays on his flute, the ever-existing youth. Your lotus feet are adored by Brahma and Shiva, neither of whom would leave you, not even for a beat. Your features are unlimited. You are the ingredient of all creatures. Whether they have hands, claws, jaws, or paws, they are your parts and parcels. Those who are smart serve you with all their hearts. You guard your devotees who never depart from the hearth of your sheltering breasts. Lord, I confess that I've messed up, repressed my service, failed the test, and yet I'm thirsty for your mercy, which is bigger than my mistakes. I've heard that all it takes to awaken your protection is a helpless cry of affection. Today, in spite of shame, I'm calling your name in the middle of the fight to ask you to reclaim me from the might of the crocodile's bite. Lord, after my release from these teeth of the croc, can you kindly block my ignorance and lock me into your devotional service? Bring my purpose back to the service. I'm knocking at your door. Lord, kindly keep me close forevermore. Hearing the eloquent prayers of the elephant, the Lord steered Garuda to the spot. He sheared off the crocodile's head with his chakra. When the reptile lay dead and Gajendra was shed of his dread, he picked up the thread of his prayers and said, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. There you go. A new inclusion to our repertoire, the ballad of Gajendra, if you will. Okay. Resuming, just like Gajendra resumed his prayers after the crocodile's head was severed from its body, we will pick up the thread of where we were when we left off a Wednesday before Wednesday. We were talking, just to summarize, about the qualities of a bona fide listener. A bona fide listener to the topics of the Bhagavatam should, first of all, ask relevant questions. Second of all, maintain their own purity. Third, not talk during the katha. Fourth, be focused, not make the speaker repeat things because of a lack of diligent listening. The next quality of the listener is to be humble. The third quality is to ponder the points, not just listen and then forget it, but to go over and ponder those points. Then the next quality is to incorporate the points that the speaker has said into his life. It's also mentioned that only when one incorporates the points that the speaker made into one's life can it be said that one is truly heard, because one must not only receive the knowledge, but one should integrate it and then carry it forward and then spread it. Bharata bhumite hayanamusha janmashartika para upakara. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, everyone who has taken birth in Bharatvarsha, which you can narrowly interpret as India, or you can broadly interpret it as anybody who took birth in this whole earth planet, should make their life successful by understanding the science of Krishna consciousness from an authorized speaker, and then para upakara, do themselves the best welfare work by becoming Krishna consciousness, and then do others the best welfare work by spreading Krishna consciousness far and wide. And this mission of relieving the suffering of the fallen conditioned souls is at the heart of the Guru. The Guru has received the message, he's integrated it, and now he's sharing it with his disciples, and the expectation is that they in turn will pass it on. That person is truly a disciple of an enlightened Guru who understands the heart of the Guru. You've heard us tell you many times before that Prabhupada only met his spiritual master initially for a short time. I think it was in 1926. And in that first meeting, in the first few seconds of the meeting, Bhaktisiddhanta said, you're an educated young man. Why don't you speak in the English languages? So from that point, that first meeting, and there were others, but not many, there weren't many occasions in which Prabhupada met his spiritual master. But that first occasion was the instance where Bhaktisiddhanta opened up and revealed his heart. His innermost desire was to spread the mission of Lord Chaitanya to the Western countries. He revealed his mind confidentially upon that first meeting, in the first few seconds of that first meeting, and Prabhupada took that in. Never mind, he wasn't able to fulfill that order for a number of years because of family obligations, but he never forgot that, and he carried the innermost desire of his spiritual master in his heart. It was an extraordinary transmission from Bhaktisiddhanta's heart to Prabhupada's heart. And in this connection, we mentioned that it's not required to hear repeatedly over and over and over and over from the Guru. If you get that chance, by all means, take advantage of it. But there are many instances where great spiritualists have heard only once from their Guru, and that for a short, reduced period of time. But because they plumbed, they discerned the heart of the Guru, that was all they needed in order to launch them on their spiritual journey. So even if one does have the opportunity to repeatedly hear from elevated spiritual leaders, one should take each session as if it was the only one and squeeze all the nectar out of that and incorporate them. So those are the qualities of a bona fide listener. And we had a couple of sessions on the qualities of a bona fide speaker, from whom one should speak. Avashava mudgodyanam putam harikan shavanam aivatantam sarpachishtam yata paro. We're cautioned, Avashnava mudgodyanam, do not hear these transcendental, purified topics about Krishna from a non-Krishna devotee. A non-Krishna devotee will never be able to achieve the desired effect in his audience of awakening eternal, imperishable love of God. He can't awaken in others what he hasn't awakened in himself. Therefore, the injunction is, don't just hear from anybody, hear from those who are coming in the line of disciplic succession and who have understood the nature of the disciplic succession, and that the nature of the knowledge is that it's not meant to be squandered or locked up in the basement or in a safety deposit box somewhere, but it is meant to be spread all over the world. Now, here are the qualities of a good speaker. First of all, when he or she speaks, it shouldn't be a show. Not that they have one life, which involves mundane foodstuffs, unoffered food, movies, popular novels, prajalpa, small talk of politics and gossip and so on and so forth. And then they kind of pull it all together and then sit up on a high seat and make a show of speaking Harikatha. That's not who a bona fide speaker should be. A bona fide speaker, when they sit on the seat, all they're doing is sharing their thoughts, which are with them 24/7. One is constantly in Krishna consciousness. And when the opportunity to speak comes, he doesn't have to make a show. He doesn't have to muster his resources and put on another hat or put on another face or pretend. What you see is what you get with a bona fide speaker of Harikatha. The second quality is no bona fide speaker speaks for some material gain. The speaking itself is the reward, is the nectar. When you speak in a bona fide way from the Srimad Bhagavatam, you enter into the spiritual world. You dive deep into the relationship between Krishna and his devotees. There is nothing higher than that. There's no higher duty. There's no higher occupation. There's no higher topic of conversation. There's no better use of one's energy on the part of the speaker, the hearer. One does not speak Bhagavatam for any other gain. Example is given. The Bhagavatam is not the branch to get some other fruit. The Bhagavatam is the fruit to which all other branches should lead. The third point is that one should have the best interests of the audience in mind. One should make friendship with those to whom one is speaking. One should try to speak, and one should, before one speaks, pray to the Lord to empower the speaker to present the points of the Bhagavatam in such a way as to take hold in the hearts of the listeners and to create a transformative effect so that they may act in such a way moving forward that they get released ultimately from the clutches of Maya and consequently from birth, death, disease, and old age. So the third qualification of bona fide speakers is that one should have the best interest, suridam sarvabhutanam, of the audience in mind. Krishna himself is described in the 5th chapter as the well-wisher of all living beings. A speaker, being a representative of Krishna, must also have the best interests of the living beings in mind. And with that in mind, a corollary qualification is that one doesn't speak above the heads of one's audience. One can explain the subject matter from different angles, different points of view, in such a way that it is palatable, it's digestible. Tram apiyadabhushuta vishudam vibhu samyapyariyena vidam prakyahi dahor mahorda sanklesha nirvanam usani yatadham. This subject matter is very high. If you want to go on the high end, read the commentaries of the Goswamis, read Jiva Goswami, read Bhaktisiddhanta. It is so high. The language, the grammar, the vocabulary, the philosophy is so high. Most people are just going to be left like Stan Laurel. What did you say, Oliver? A speaker doesn't, just in order to show off his intellectual dexterity, speak above the audience in polysyllabic words, highfalutin concepts, which have no connection with the day-to-day challenges of a lifestyle. A speaker can present the subject matter for each and every audience. I gave the example of Radhika Raman. Radhika Raman graduated college in Idaho at the top of his class at the age of 19. At 21, he had his PhD from Oxford University, and he's now the Dean of Religious Studies at Utah State University. There isn't anybody on the planet that has a keener, more expansive intellect than Radhika Raman. And yet, if you go to YouTube and listen to some of his talks, he speaks so simply that there's no one who can't understand him. Doesn't use big fancy words, speaks right to the layperson, right to the layperson. This is the genius of speaking: time, place, and audience, with the best interests of one's audience in mind, it follows that one wants to present the material in a very, very palatable way. Even Krishna, when he's speaking to Arjuna and to all of us through Arjuna, spoke the Bhagavad Gita very simple. If you look at the Bhagavad Gita, there are hardly any words more than 2 syllables. There are hardly any lines more than 3 words. And there are no verses, practically speaking, more than 4 lines. This is, Prabhupada said the Bhagavad Gita is the ABCD. Literally, Bhagavad Gita, in terms of comprehensibility, is on the level of, here is Jane, here is Jim, here is Spot, here are Jane, Jim, and Spot all together. Spot is running, Jane and Jim are running after Spot. Jane and Jim throw the ball, Spot goes for the ball, Spot mouths the ball, Spot returns the ball, repeat. It's literally that simple. Arjuna is not a simpleton, but Krishna knew that we were going to read this conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, and we are pretty much simpletons. And as the Kali Yuga progresses, our intellectual prowess will become even more diminished as time goes on. Krishna himself models this practice of dumbing it down, if you will. The important thing is not to be a big scholar, to be a big philosopher. The important thing is to awaken the seed, the flame of devotion in the heart of the living being. And a speaker is that person who is described as one who is expert in doing that. Example is given that within wood, there's fire. Within every wooden piece of furniture or wooden implement, fire rests. But the fire doesn't spontaneously erupt. It requires something called a match coming from outside, externally. When the match comes and touches the wood, then the fire which is inside the wood leaps out to join the fire which is outside of the wood. A qualified speaker is he who can speak with such understanding of the audience that he can bring out that fire of bhakti which lies dormant within the heart. And then the last qualification of a bona fide speaker is that he's respected by other speakers. When Sutta Goswami came fresh from the assembly of sages on the banks of the Yamuna River and the recitation of the Srimad Bhagavatam by Sukadeva Goswami, he went to Naimisharanya where there was an exalted body of sages headed up by Sanaka Rishi. As soon as Sanaka Rishi saw Sukadeva Goswami arriving in the distance, he welcomed him. Muni asadya prishtaham bhavadvirokata yad krita krisham yadmashu prasidati. You are a worthy representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We ask you to respond to our questions about Krishna because they are of essential relevance to the world's welfare. Now, when you answer our questions, please answer them in such a way as to satisfy those who are highly intellectual, but don't leave out the masses of people either. We ask you in your expertise and from your depth of realization to speak in such a way that not only will the intellectuals be satisfied, at least you'll give them the seeds that they can take and then grow them and expand them, but that you'll even more importantly speak in such a way that the masses of people will resonate with the subject matter. And that way, not only the intellectuals, the high class people, but the people in general will be satisfied. So this subject matter from the expressions of Sanaka Rishi, we can understand, we can discern just from the way that he's greeted Sutta Goswami, that these words, these sound vibrations of Srimad Bhagavatam have the potential to create a worldwide revolution of consciousness. They're like nuclear weapons. Tadbhag vishargo janataga vipra yasmin pradisho namami ananta shinvanti gyanti shinanti sadhava. Even though the literature itself may have some grammatical mistakes. It may be imperfectly composed. The printing may not be on the level of the best-selling novels. In spite of those so-called flaws or shortcomings, the potency of the Srimad Bhagavatam is such that it is a weapon of mass instruction. It is a weapon of mass instruction. We heard in 2019 about how someone at a meat market in a medium-sized town in China, by eating the flesh of a bat, contracted what later became known as the coronavirus. And from that initial infection, the virus spread like wildfire all over the world, shut down governments, closed stores, caused millions and millions of deaths, brought about a pandemic the like of which has not been known since 1917. That was all from one person contacting the virus by eating a bat in China, and it spread like wildfire all over the world. So the indication here is that the Bhagavatam, in a good sense, has the same infectious potency. That the Bhagavatam, those to whom the Bhagavatam is imparted in a bona fide authorized way, they can become very easily infected by love of God and themselves become carriers who pass on this infection to other people. So just as to use a play on words, the coronavirus was spread and transmitted all over the world like wildfire, similarly, the knowledge of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which we call facetiously the coronavirus, the virus of kindness, also has the power to spread itself far and wide. In fact, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, 500 years ago, as the Supreme Personality, he said, Pritivateya Chejato Nagara Savatra Prachayave Morina. And in due course of time, the chanting Hare Krishna, the practice and culture of bhakti will be spread all over the world, even to the smallest towns and villages. This Bhagavatam, the topics of Bhagavatam, the connection between a bona fide speaker and a bona fide listener has immense potency. Just like where you have a potent man and you have a fertile woman, a child, a beautiful, well-formed child with unlimited potential is going to be the inevitable result. So similarly, wherever there's a speaker, qualified speaker, a qualified audience, there will be immense opulence, victory, morality. Vasudeva Gata Prashnam Purusham Spudanti Bhaktaram Shadaram Tat Salalam Yata Paraham. Wherever there's a qualified speaker, and wherever there's a qualified listener, and wherever there are people sitting around within earshot of this dialogue, this conversation, this process of question and answering, there will be extreme purity. The example is given that when the Ganges broke through the outer covering of the universe, being perforated by the foot of Vamana, the dwarf incarnation, the Ganges, which is none other than the causal ocean, which surrounds this universe, the shell of this universe, a purified ocean, the Ganges flowed in and it purified first the upper planets, then the middle planets, and then it purified the lower planets. Lord Shiva took the torrential force of the waters on his head, and it was dispersed in rivulets. And those rivulets then went in different directions to purify Bhurvashaha, the upper, the middle, and lower planetary system. It is said that in the same way that the Ganges purifies the upper, lower, and planetary systems, those three areas, the conversation between a bona fide speaker and a bona fide listener purifies the speaker, it purifies the listener, and it also purifies anybody who happens to hear that conversation. Now, since Gutenberg, we've had the advantage of books. And that means any conversation can be transcribed. The sound vibration can be captured with ink on paper, can be distributed through airports and bus stations and shopping malls. Those sound vibrations can go to every corner of the world, as Lord Chaitanya said, every village, every town, every nook, every corner. And in this way, the sound vibration of the spiritual world resonates throughout the entire surface of the globe. Now, what could be more Mahat Punya? What could be more supremely fortunate for all the living beings here on the planet? Maharaj Parikshit, under the most daunting circumstances, imagine Maharaj Parikshit, imagine yourself in Maharaj Parikshit's shoes. Say you're young, you're in your late 20s, just reaching the peak of your intellectual and physical powers. You have not one, but presumably several beautiful wives, highborn, in love with you, creating a beautiful, felicitous domestic situation. You have children. You have sovereignty over the entire planet, unrivaled sovereignty. You're a devotee. You engage in devotional service, the process of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Bandhanam, Dasham. You have all facility to do that every single day. And due to a small offense on your part, you get cursed to die within 7 days. All that is going to be wrested from you within a short period of 7 days. You would have otherwise normally had 60, 70 years to live in complete sovereignty, sense gratification. You would have enjoyed your sons and your grandsons growing up around you. You would have enjoyed the citizens advancing in Krishna consciousness under a peaceful and harmonious atmosphere, free from rogues and thieves and enemies. All that's taken away unfairly. You did not do anything to warrant that severe level of punishment. Now, in the face of all of that, Maharaj Parikshit described himself as Mahat Punya, supremely fortunate. Tulyavalambanipi nashagam bhagavat sangi marjanam kim mutashisha. He or she is fortunate who gets even a moment's association with a pure devotee, a representative of Krishna. Even a moment's association is enough. Prabhupada practically only initially had a moment's association with his spiritual master. Magrari had a moment with Narada Muni. Valmiki had a moment with Narada. Dhruva Maharaj had a moment with Narada Muni. Prahlad Maharaj had a brief period of time in the womb of his mother, and so on and so forth. That it only takes a moment's contact with a pure devotee to create, for one, the greatest level of good fortune. Now, here's a man who's had everything taken away. He's got a death sentence hanging over him. And he ends up not sleeping, not eating, or not drinking for 7 days. If you were to have all drinking, all eating, all sleeping, all control of your life snatched away from you today, would you describe yourself as being supremely fortunate? I don't think so. Name soro parayani brahmana ashahasha namiridim. Maharaj Parikshit said, it's true. I'm not going to sleep anymore in this lifetime. I'm not going to drink another drop of water in the time that's remaining to me in this body. And I'm not going to let food pass my lips. All that is finished. That part of my life, those activities are finished and gone. They're behind me. And yet I still consider myself fortunate because I've gotten the association of a pure devotee. Anyone who intersects with a pure devotee is fortunate. Now, not only do I have that level of fortune that I've met Shukadeva Goswami, he's the son of Badarayana. He's the answer to Vyasadev's prayers. Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation of God. He compiled the Vedic literatures, and then the ripened fruit of the Vedic literatures, Srimad Bhagavatam. After he had finished the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the fruit of the Vedas, he was in anxiety as to how that would spread, how that would proliferate, who would propagate him. So he went deep into the forest, where there are no other habitation, where only the Badarayana tree and fruits grow, in the most remote part of the forest. And he called out, send me a ray of Vishnu, send me a messenger, send me someone who, now that I have compiled this great literature, I can trust them to spread it all over the world. And that ray of Vishnu, that answer to his prayers, was Sukadeva Goswami. Maharaj Parikshit therefore describes himself, first of all, as greatly fortunate, for having met Sukadeva Goswami. But now, being able to sit at his feet continuously and hear Hari Katha from the most qualified speaker in the association of the world's most qualified listeners, this is nuclear, folks. This is big. This is not just a historical landmark. This is not just a milestone. This is a turning point in all of history. There's no overestimating this encounter, this convergence of Sukadeva Goswami, the ideal speaker, Maharaj Parikh, and the assembly of sages who are the ideal listeners. The result of that is the 20,000 pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on our, 31st or 32nd segment of the 8th canto talking about Gajendra. Now, there's quite a few verses in the opening of this canto, in the first chapter and the beginning of the second chapter, which don't seem to get to the heart of the story. There are a number of verses describing the beauty of the area in which Gajendra was sporting. It's called Trikuta Mountains. It's situated on a heavenly planet. There are all kinds of descriptions about how beautiful and ethereal and heavenly this place was. One might ask, well, why are we dilly-dallying around with these descriptions of nature? Why don't we jump right into the story? And some might be tempted to just skip through all these elaborate descriptions of nature and go right to the point where the crocodile grabs the elephant's legs with his jaws. That is not the proper way. Bhagavatam is not to be read to find out what happened. It's not like to sit on your edge of your seat until 1 o'clock in the morning till you find out what happened. No, it is a methodical process for cleansing the heart. In the ancient days, and I don't know if this process is still known to anybody living in the modern world, but in former times, those who knew the art would take base metal. They would perform these procedures on the base metal multiple times. The process was called alchemy. They would do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, performing these procedures on this cheap, valueless base metal. And after 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, who knows? After doing the same thing X number of times, you reach a point where the base metal turns to gold. Like I said, nobody, may sound fantastic. That's because nobody's done it to our knowledge recently, but this was supposed to have been an art that was known and practiced in ancient days. You could turn base metal into gold. Similarly, the power of the Srimad Bhagavatam is such that it can take the iron-hearted, the dull-hearted heart of the people of Kali Yuga, the dull heart of the elephant, which is known for having a dull and relatively insensitive body, and completely transform that into something glittering, golden, effulgent, and very, very valuable. But in order to achieve that, you have to be willing to be repetitive, not monotonous, not boring, not parrot-like. Recitation, hearing, and chanting of the names of the Lord in the Bhagavatam are never meant to be dry, static. You have to revisit the Bhagavatam each time with a determination to discuss it, to churn it, to bring out newer and newer meanings, to integrate that into your life and to practice it. There's a lot more than what you'd think just from hearing and chanting. It is an alchemical process to turn the base metal of our hearts into the golden, loving, devotional hearts of Krishna's devotee, following the footsteps of great souls like Gajendra and like Prahlad Maharaj and like Dhruva Maharaj. So the elaborate descriptions of the Trikuta mountain area in one of the heavenly planets are very, very appropriate, not only because this is a place where the Lord appeared. This is a Dham. The Lord's lotus feet touched down. Garuda brought the Lord to this spot. He sheared off the head of the crocodile. He received the prayers of Gajendra, and he bestowed his mercy on Gajendra. That means this place has been consecrated by the touch of the Lord's lotus feet. He left his own abode, being called by the prayers, the helpless prayers of his devotees, traveled to that spot. He's at the beck and call of his pure devotees. Imagine the all-powerful Lord. Nobody tells him what to do. He's completely independent. He creates the world. He causes the world. He charges the sun god, the moon god, each and every presiding deity of each and every planet. He gives them their instructions through Lord Vishnu, and they go about doing their duties for literally millions and millions of years. And he himself remains aloof, plays on his flute. So he cannot be told what to do. But at the same time, when his devotee calls out in helplessness and pure bhakti, he leaves his spiritual world and comes to that spot. And that spot becomes famous. It becomes celebrated as a holy dham. Now, it's also significant for us who are conditioned souls to learn about this dham, because in this place, the consciousness of Gajendra experienced an evolution from, first of all, the level of bhakti. Initially, he was in an enjoying mood. The water, the intoxicating honey, the eroticism of being in the water with his wives, that's called bhakti, that's enjoyment. Then his enjoyment was cut short when the crocodile grabbed his legs. At that point, the bhakti was over, and he was in a life and death struggle. He was using all of his might, all of his strength to prevail over the crocodile. So that's called Shakti. He was called upon to work desperately to preserve his life. Now, the crocodile himself represents ignorance. The jaws of the crocodile represent that ignorance which has got hold of each and every one of us. We think we're this body. We think the byproducts of this body are our family, our friends. We think the place from which this body took its birth is worshipable, holy ground. This is all ignorance. And so just in the same way, analogously, that Gajendra was in the jaws of the crocodile, we are also in the same position as Gajendra, because we're in the jaws of the crocodile known as ignorance. We need to get free. And that freedom, which comes through transcendental knowledge from ignorance, is called mukti. So Gajendra started with bhakti, an enjoying spirit. He went to Shakti, the fight for his life, the expenditure of vast amounts of energy, after which he wanted mukti. In the beginning, you'll note from the thread of the narration, all Gajendra wanted was to get saved and to go back to his sense enjoyment. That's all he wanted in the beginning. He asked the Lord, save him, kill the crocodile so that I can continue sense gratification uninterruptedly. But as he offered his prayers, and as the consciousness of his previous life as Indradumna, great devotee, gradually manifested itself, he lost his desire to continue living in the body of an elephant in ignorance. Eventually, the second half of his prayers, as we're going to see, he's praying not to be delivered from the crocodile to continue his life as an elephant. He's saying, don't let me continue my life as an elephant. Let me continue my life free from the jaws of the crocodile of ignorance. Whether I die as an elephant or whether I live as an elephant is not my main concern now. My main concern is that I not continue living under the spell, gripped by the jaws of ignorance. And so his prayer goes from save me from the jaws of the crocodile to save me from the jaws of ignorance. And that is called mukti. And then finally, bhakti. He wants only love of Krishna. When the Lord appears before him on Garuda with his forearms as Hari, the Manvantara for that particular age, that is the form. That is his Kul Deva. That is his Ishta Deva. That is his worshipable Lord. And he surrenders himself, lock, stock, and barrel, to that incarnation of the Lord known as Hari. And Hari actually means one who takes away miseries. Gajendra might well have said at this point, when he evolved from bhukti to shakti to mukti to bhakti, he might have said, along with the sages of old, Lord, take my life and let it be consecrated to thee. Lord, take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Take my hands and let them move at the impulse of thy love. Take my feet and let them be swift and beautiful for thee. Take my lips and let them sing always only for my King. Take my mouth and let it be filled with messages from thee. Take my silver and my gold, not a mite would I withhold. Take my intellect, use every power thou shalt choose. Take my will and make it thine, it shall be no longer mine. Take my heart, it is thine own, it shall be thy royal throne. Take my love, my Lord, I tender at thy feet, its treasure stored. Take myself and I will be ever only all for thee. Good point at which to end, I believe. It's 8:15. That's the extent of the time that we have available to us today. We'll be back tomorrow, Transcendental Tuesday, and then Wednesday is the actual day of Janmashtami, Krishna's birth celebration. We'll be observing that from 7 o'clock till after the midnight Arti in Salt Lake City. There'll be a Abhishek, a sacred bathing ceremony, lots and lots of kirtan. There'll be the breaking of the pot of yogurt as it's suspended aloof, and lots of prasadam, lots of kirtan. We're a little short. Some of our members are otherwise disposed or out of town. So if anybody would like to step forward and volunteer for some of the cooking and serving out and cleaning, that would be most appreciated by the Lord and his devotees. So that will be Wednesday night, September 6th, from 7 o'clock until midnight in Salt Lake City. And if you should not be able to go to Salt Lake City, our own Radhika Jivan, our resident saint, will be here in Spanish Fork, keeping the temple open a little later than normal to receive visitors who would like to come here on Janmashtami. Otherwise, we'll have a dance performance and we'll have a bathing ceremony here on Sunday, the 10th of September, as part of our regular Sunday feast program. So a lot of options there. I hope you'll take advantage of at least one of them. We've got Brent jumped on initially, and Jean. Secondly, Shali, Hare Krishna, bye Bobby. Thank you all for putting up with our absence and rejoining us again after 2 weeks of being elsewhere. We'll do classes this week and next week, and then it's another color festival in Ohio. Anjali, Hare Krishna, and Richard Boninath. Those are all there on Facebook, and we've got Rob on Zoom. Do you have any poetry, any rhymes for us today, Rob?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. It's good to have you back.
Thank you.
So what I got today was live the lesson if you want progression.
Mm,
The guru lives what he gives.
very nice.
Assume the guru's heart and you will never be apart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To proselytize, you must be authorized. If you have a qualified listener and a qualified speaker, Krishna will be there.
Yes. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I think you've captured the essence of our discussion today. Appreciate that. And we'll dive deeper. I'm not sure, I've lost track, but I think we're at the minimum tomorrow will be the 32nd 45-minute session on Gajendra. So we'll see you then. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.